2020 is just about over.
Okay.
You think?
Almost.
November 3rd is going to it's the new Year's.
It's the New Year? November 4th?
November 3rd.
New world?
That's right. And if you don't vote for Joe Biden, you went black. You already know that, right?
50's about to find that out, too.
You know why you know how you know that Adam and Eve weren't black?
Uh-oh.
Is you ever take a rib from a black man?
You can't
you can't do that. You can't do that.
You might have a point there.
You know what I'm saying?
You don't touch my ribs.
Oh, man.
Hey, y'all, welcome to Cross Politic on the Fight, Laugh, Feast Network. Good to be with you guys.
You
like that?
No, not really, but it was
okay. All right. Let's see. Where are we at? What are we doing now? That intro.
What is this stuff?
We're just recording a show game. That's
that
all.
Intro was so good. I lost my place.
You sound like Joe Biden.
Make sure you guys. Come on, man.
Come on,
That's
man.
pretty low. That's low.
Is that good? Is that good? Make sure you guys sign up for our magazine that's dropping. March. It's actually January 1st is when the subscription starts. Your magazine will first appear in the mail in March. We're super excited about it.
4 issues.
It's going to be 4 issues a year, and it's basically going to be a new book every quarter, about 80 pages to 90 pages is what we're going to be shooting for. So basically like a small book every quarter with various authors, Pastor Toby, C.R. Wiley, all the guys on the network. Pastor Doug will be participating in it with us. Hopefully we get Nate to write for us.
And you're wanting to actually, we want to kind of maybe theme it to the fight, to the laughing, to the feasting.
Yeah. The plan is also to have a psalm of the quarter that will have Aaron Snell or Mark Reagan walk us through a psalm of the quarter. Here's how we sing it here. So that'll be in the magazine. Also recipes, barbecue recipes. I want to do some a recipe a quarter in there because we want Fight, Laugh, Feast. We
need some of that. Need some smoking going on.
If we're gonna fight, we need food to get us there. You know what I'm saying? All right. And then, of course, join the club. All the conference content is now in the portal for club members.
Archived.
So if you missed the conference, you can still join the club and watch the talks. It was just fantastic.
High quality ones are almost there.
Make sure you download the app. We're on Edified Network also, so you can download Edified's app also. And
cool.
We prefer you guys download our
They
app.
let us be on there.
They did.
Just search Fight, Laugh, Feast.
That's right, in your app store. And then lastly, Dr. Tom Price, who's coming on later. Dr. Tom Price is coming on in the next segment, and he's teaching a class on theology and culture.
Tripology.
He started preaching on us.
He did.
What was it like?
We kind of
Battle Tactics for the Baptized.
Battle Tactics. That was actually the name of the class.
That's what it
should have been.
It should have been. Battle Tactics for the Baptized.
That's right.
Oh, he's going to war.
Yeah.
You want to go to war?
It's really good.
Go to war.
Hey, Classical Conversations.
I'm for real.
Thank you so much for your support. Classical Conversations supports homeschooling parents by cultivating the love of learning through a Christian worldview and fellowship with other families. They provide a classical, Christ-centered curriculum, local like-minded communities across the United States, in fact, in several countries around the world, and they train parents who are striving to be great classical educators for their children in the home. You can always find out more information and get connected at classicalconversations.com. Classical Christian Connected Community.
I gotta say, Classical Conversations are day one. Do y'all know what day ones are?
No.
They've been down since day one.
Oh, day one.
They day ones right there. So since Cross Politics started, those guys have been down with us.
It's true.
We're so grateful. Support the people. Yeah, support the people who support us.
Salute.
This last week was the last presidential debate.
Yep.
Probably ever.
No. Gabe, don't you even.
Don't say that.
We don't know. But we know November 3rd is the last day of this new year. And so we got some clips we're going to walk you guys through.
We are talking a lot about struggling small businesses and business owners these days. Do you think this is the right time to ask them to raise the minimum wage? You, of course, support a $15 federal minimum wage.
I do, because I think one of the things we're going to have to do is we're going to have to bail them out, too. We should be bailing them out now, those small businesses. You got 1 in 6 of them going under. They're not going to be able to make it back. They passed a package that allows us to be able to call PPP. Money is supposed to go to help them do everything from organize how they can deal with their businesses being open safely. Schools, how they can make classrooms smaller, how they can hire more teachers, how they can put ventilation systems in. They need the help. The businesses as well as the schools need the help. But this because these guys will not help them.
What are you going to
not
say?
Giving them any of the money.
These guys.
We are going to move on to immigration,
one thing very
but I
quickly,
want
he
to
said
get
we
your
have to help our
reaction.
small businesses by raising the minimum wage. That's not helping. I think it should be a state option. Alabama is different than New York. New York is different from Vermont.
State option.
Every state is different. It should be a state option.
You said very
we have
recently.
to help. It's very important.
That's not the
We
time
have
to use a
help
state
our
rights
small
argument.
businesses. It should be a state option. Look, I've lived in different places. I know different places. They're all different. Some places, $15 is not so bad. In other places, other states, $15 would be
Okay, President
ruinous.
Trump, thank you. Quick response.
What does Dr. Walt Williams have to say about this?
Let's find out.
A lot of people say, well, the minimum wage is an anti-poverty device. Well, that is utter nonsense. It doesn't even pass the smell test. Because if it were an anti-poverty device, well, then instead of spending all this money on foreign aid, we just have our experts at the State Department tell Bangladesh, well, you could be rich like we are, just have a higher minimum wage.
Ooh. Ooh.
There's no way I would have said as clear as he did in 30 seconds.
That is so good. Yeah. That's Grandpa Walter Williams right there.
We were in his living room.
That was in his living room.
We filmed that.
Yes.
You filmed that.
Yeah.
And I watched you film that.
That was when you had the COVID, too.
And that's when I got my book signed by...
I cannot believe I did not bring my book.
No, but here's the thing. Just I just want to underline it real quick for these people, okay?
Yeah.
People think Biden is going on national television, and nobody's laughing him off the stage for saying they need bailouts, they need to raise the minimum wage.
Yep.
Raising the minimum wage is crushing businesses.
That's right.
Is crushing the poor.
Yep.
That's right.
You don't just vote more money for people.
Right.
It really does. And at the very end of the clip, I think it got cut up slightly. It actually says nobody says that.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, Walter Williams does.
Yeah. That's all you need.
But here's the thing. Just do basic math. Yep. If you're a business owner and you're trying to pay your people, and suddenly the law comes down and says you got to pay them $1 more an hour, $2 more an hour, $3, whatever.
And it's arbitrary law.
Yeah.
Why not $20 an hour? Why not 100?
Not only is it unjust because the government has no business actually commanding me to give a certain amount of money.
Yep.
But not only that, set that aside. What does it do? It means you have less money overall.
That's right.
And so who pays for that? Well, he's going to have less workers.
Yep.
Maybe we just,
you can't hire as many employees.
Not many employees. And then at least the costs have to go up.
He said in this debate that the minimum wage does not hurt businesses. And remember, the Seattle raised their minimum wage to $15 an hour, and it's destroyed the restaurant business.
Listen, we've had this conversation all the way back to the early 90s into the late 80s. Milton Friedman did this. Yes. But this is not a new conversation. First of all, I want to take what you put on the shelf and bring that off and say for a second, I make a contract with my employer what it is I'm going to make. The federal government doesn't get to decide between the two of us. If I say I want to work for $1, they don't get to tell me, no, you have to work for 10. That is First of all, that's essential.
It's actually a form of theft.
This absolutely well, because that's how they get to tell you to shut down your businesses.
Right. If they can demand that you pay people a certain amount of money,
they have the authority
then
to
they
tell
can tell you have to have plexiglass.
That's exactly right. That's what's coming next.
Masks,
but
whatever.
For someone who claims to be a person for the minorities, minimum wage has hurt minorities probably more than probably anything else outside of the policies they've created inside of the Democratic Party. But it hurts because if you have to pay somebody $15 an hour, then you're like, if I don't like this guy and you're an actual racist, then what you're going to do is like, well, I'm not paying him $50 an hour. I'll pay my stupid uncle, to do this. But if this guy is like willing to work for cheaper than your uncle, even if you're racist, your favorite color is green. Okay, well, I'll pay two of the people who I don't like. And they, all of a sudden, these people who you really are racist towards get a chance to make money and provide for themselves. Where your uncle now, you're like, he too expensive.
This is frankly why a lot of people coming up from South America and Central America and Mexico and so on.
Right.
They're coming up a lot of times. They work under the table.
That's right.
They're not just so they can work for whatever rate they want, and they do good. And they're like, I'm willing to do that job.
That's right.
I'm willing to do that job for whatever, and that just explodes, and they do really well.
That's right. That's right. I don't even know what how society defines socialism anymore. Like I don't minimum wage is socialism, and then here we're talking about healthcare.
Wanting socialized medicine. What do you say to people who have concerns that your healthcare plan, which includes a government insurance option, takes the country one step closer to a healthcare system run entirely by the government? What's your response
say it's ridiculous. It's like saying that we're the idea that the fact that there's a public option that people can choose. that makes it a socialist plan? Look,
yes.
The difference between the president, I think health care is not a privilege, it's a right. Everyone should have the right to have affordable health care. And I am very proud of my plan. It's gotten endorsed by all the major labor unions as well as
there you go.
as well as a whole range of other people who in fact are concerned in the medical field. This is something that's going to save people's lives, and this is going to give some people an opportunity to have health care for their children. How many of you home are worried and rolling around in bed tonight wondering what in God's name you're going to do if you get sick?
I feel like he's going to sniff me
because you've
when he
lost
looks at the
your
camera.
Home insurance, your health insurance, your company's gone under. We have to provide health insurance for people at an affordable rate, and that's what I do.
Here's another thing about this conversation. I mean, there was a lot of untruths spoken last night.
Piles.
Obamacare, if you guys remember, killed about 20 million Americans' insurance plans because they became illegal.
Right.
Those plans became illegal.
Right.
Yeah.
There's 180 million Americans that have private health insurance,
right.
and now 20 million Americans are on Obamacare. Right.
But why is the government in health insurance?
And
the whole thing is just another application, though, of minimum wage laws.
Exactly
Actually,
right.
it's what
That's
they're doing
right.
because they're telling health insurance companies and doctors and everybody else this is how much you may charge or you may not charge.
Well, you remember Obamacare drove up deductibles, like
of course,
extensively. I left my company when Obamacare was becoming and I went and Googled and did all the research for what plans I could get and everything, and it was just unbelievable how expensive.
When the government gets involved in this stuff, prices always go through the roof.
Always.
And they always go through the roof because you don't know anymore what the factors are.
Yep.
If you're in charge of your own property, your own widgets, your own services, and you make a contract with somebody, there can be a personal relationship there. And where there's relationships of trust,
that's right.
You don't have to make all kinds of crazy plans for what happens if they screw me.
That's right.
Right? But as soon as a government can come in and vote different things, regulations, and now you need to do this, and now your 2x4s, your studs need to be so many inches apart, and
prices
you have
go up.
this many plugs, and the inspectors are going to come in. Prices go up. Not only to actually do that, but because you have to make contingency plans constantly about what happens if I didn't take something else into consideration. It drives the prices through the roof. Last thing really quick on this is that health insurance is not a right.
That's right.
Yep.
Health care is not a right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
That's exactly right.
This is foolishness.
It's not the job of the government, first of all, but secondarily, it's just not a right.
Yeah.
It's a blessing.
That's right. And it's the responsibility of the people who are
and it's the responsibility of fathers.
That's right.
Men to provide for their families, to nourish and cherish their wives as their own bodies, which means feeding them, clothing them, putting a roof over their head, making sure they're warm in the wintertime, and the same thing with their children. That's the family's job, and the church is the backstop for that.
And it's very possible that you might be rolling around in your bed trying to figure out how to take care of your family.
It's true.
But it's not the government's. How's the government? That's not their job.
You are way better
That's
at
right.
it. And
Way better.
It really is it really can be a challenge.
Yes.
But you are way better at it than a bureaucrat in Washington.
Did you say Samaritan Ministries?
I might have.
Is that what you said?
Samaritan, like Samaritan
Huh.
Ministries.
I wonder if they're a sponsor for us or something like that.
Yeah, they're corporate partners.
They might be.
But I think, watching this debate, I watched a lot of it. I didn't watch the whole thing, but watching this debate, and I think really we've allowed the government to get too far into too many things, and all these questions, the questions that they're asking are actually ludicrous. Should the government be involved in healthcare? Should the government
they're
be
not
involved
even asking
in
that. Gabe, they're not even asking that.
No, they're just assuming.
Yes.
Well, it's just a huge one huge assumption.
The reason they're assuming it is because we're assuming it too.
But it's been happening for over 100 years.
We're asking, what are you going to do about my health insurance?
Right.
Yep.
Right.
What are you going to do about my minimum wage?
My oil.
Right.
What are you going to do about race?
Right.
That's not
their job.
Yeah.
You want, and what about fracking?
All right,
Now
let
we have to ask
let me
about
allow
fracking.
Vice President Biden to respond.
I never said I oppose fracking.
You said it on tape.
I did. Show the tape. Put it on your website.
I'll put it on.
Put it on the website. The fact of the matter is he's flat lying.
What's wrong with you people?
This is
no new fracking.
We are going to get rid of fossil fuels.
Well, what about, say, stopping fracking and stopping pipe?
Would there be any place for fossil fuels, including coal and fracking, in a Biden administration?
No, we would work it out. We would make sure it's eliminated.
Eliminate.
I guarantee we're going to end fossil fuel, and I am not going to cooperate. No ability for the oil industry to continue to drill, period. ends. Number one.
Three consecutive American presidents have enjoyed stints of explosive economic growth due to a boom in oil and natural gas production. As president, would you be willing to sacrifice some of that growth, even knowing potentially that it could displace thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of blue-collar workers in the interest of transitioning to that greener economy?
The answer is yes. The answer is yes.
He would be willing to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of jobs, all these blue-collar workers.
I'm just thinking about the
and
people
fracking
who prepped him for this debate are sitting back there now, bald-headed.
Oops.
Somebody had a full
I never
head.
said I would end fracking. Put up the video.
Oh my goodness, what are you thinking?
And then the videos went up.
Look, I made the mistake of asking, it's like, does anybody have? Where's that fact check video? I made the mistake during the debate to ask for it. I got hit like 20 videos.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. Everybody just blew that joker up. Yeah. You know, one of the things I thought about, Gabe, you hit this before, and we've talked about the paternal attitude of the people have created an environment where two people are sitting here arguing and fighting over us. Yep. And one of the places that it became evident to me when they were asking, hey, do you understand how black families feel about having to have the conversation and talk with their kids? And Joe went on to say his thing, and then Trump went on to say his thing. And at that moment, I realized that black people really aren't a pawn of any particular party, but that's what's happening. We're being used as pawns of a particular party. But it's not just black people. They did that with everybody.
Right.
Everybody was a pawn.
Yeah, they're all just talking about how much chocolate ice cream they're going to give to everybody.
Yes.
And that's the more free chocolate ice cream. I'm giving more. And so on the how did Trump's answer to the question about black people, it was like, well, I've given them more money for colleges.
Exactly.
I gave
It's
everything else. It's like, no. What we want you to do, if you want to honor the dignity of the image of God in all of us, is do what God called you to do and then get out of the way.
That's right. Yeah.
That's how you honor my dignity as a man. That's how you honor the image of God in me.
Yes.
Is by doing what God called you to do, which is punish criminals and then get out of the way.
That's it.
Right? Stay in your lane and then get out of the way. And when those questions come, you say, well, that's not my job. And because I honor and respect the God who gave me this job and the God who made everyone in this country in his image, I'm not going to do that for them. I'm going to cheer them on. I can praise those who do good.
That's right.
I'll cheer them on. I'll say, way to go, churches. Way to go, schools. Way to go.
That's right.
But my job is not to do your job for you, because I know that when I step into that, it doesn't go well.
Right. That's right.
It never goes well when the government starts running a bunch of stuff that's not their business to run. Has 2020 taught us nothing?
I don't think it has.
No.
I don't think it
true.
has.
It's true.
But we should learn that, because at some point we're going to have to answer for this. And just for everybody to know, you're trying to figure out, where do you start at when you see something like this? How do you start gaining things back? Yeah. The best place to start in gaining some of that authority back is the most freer areas. Right now, that's education. Right. You can start your own homeschool.
Yeah.
You can start.
Get your kids out of the government schools. Do your own school.
Yeah.
Start a school. You do classical conversations. Do something.
Co-op.
Get co-op. Whatever.
Yeah.
But start there.
Start in the areas that are free.
Check out Samaritan Ministries.
That's right. Healthcare.
Health
share. Yep.
Christians helping other Christians, care for one another. Just take responsibility. Also, you probably want to take Dr. Thomas Price's Fight, Laugh, Feast class.
And which we're going to talk to him next on Cross Politics. So don't you go anywhere. We'll be right back with Dr. Tom Price talking about the culture, theology of culture.
And culture.
Battle tactics for the baptized.
I like that title better. More Cross Politics coming up next.
Hi, I'm Robert Borton, CEO of Classical Conversations. Our most precious commodity is time. No one has ever lied on their deathbed wishing they had spent more time making money. They all wish they had spent more time creating a legacy. Our modern education system steals that legacy, steals that time from our children. That's why I'm passionate about homeschooling. That's why at Classical Conversations we want to give you more time to create that legacy, follow your passions, and glorify God. Visit classicalconversations.com for more information.
Okay, you're still awake.
It's 1 in the morning.
Just making sure.
I've been up early.
There's always the hia and there's the not hia. I never know which day it is.
I don't like the not hia.
I know, right?
I got my coffee.
Which one
I went to Coeur d'Alene this morning and back.
You've been driving.
Already.
Gabe.
Hey, welcome back to Cross Politics on the one and only Fight, Laugh, Feast Network. This segment is brought to you by Gabe's Hia.
Yes.
And also with us right now on the line is Dr. Thomas Price.
Yes.
Adjunct faculty at University of St. Joseph.
The price is right.
Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. Apologize for Gabe, Tom. University of Oxford in Systematics and Ethics. One of the main characters in the Theology Pugcast.
On the network.
Which is on the Fight Laugh Feast network.
One of the great unknown treasures in Christendom.
I don't think it's that unknown. I don't think it's that unknown.
I'm hoping not, because people need some more price in their life.
And he don't forget, he plays jazz guitar.
And he's teaching a class.
And what we are very excited
jazz
about.
guitar?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's not yet.
Okay.
Hey, I can bring it.
Okay.
He is teaching a class on theology and culture for Fight Laugh Feast University. Tom, thanks so much for coming back on Cross Politic.
Oh, you're welcome. Great to be here.
Tell us first off, just what's your goal with this class? Why are you teaching it, and what do you hope to accomplish?
But I think bring it to the deepest motivation. I want it to be basically what you would call an intellectual battle training for the baptized. Or if you don't baptize the whole family young, at least for the Christian family. so intellectual battle training for the Christian family.
Amen.
And what I want to do is really pick up the something I think that has been eclipsed in a lot of, especially Western Christianity, and is really, I think, something you all, of course, put at the forefront, is that we are in a fight, and being baptized classically and the renouncing of Satan, right?
Yeah.
And all of his works,
right,
was tied to that as you are now, you put to death the idols, and your loves are now reoriented towards God and all things in relation to God. At that moment, you are also at war. It is a spiritual war, but in that spiritual war, there are arguments that try to bring themselves up against the true knowledge of God in Christ. And so what this is battle training.
Yeah.
It's not looking just at theology only for how it gives us kind of the full picture, but how it actually trains us to wean off of the idols that are around us, especially in the church. In so doing, center our things in God in Christ. And then in that process, what it looks like to wean off of them is also to have our loves reoriented. So we don't relate to everything the same way anymore. Material goods, society, politics, we relate to them as Christ is Lord, and that these are enemies that have taken over the territory that belong to Christ. And so we have an intellectual task of bringing all the truth in creation under the lordship of Christ when it has been taken and attached to a lot of these idols and have enslaved the creation. And so this is sort of a class. It's not aiming to do all of that, but be the foundations in that. What is the Christian difference, and what difference does it make? And then how does that equip us to engage current idols and their impact?
That's man, Dr. Price. I think.
And thank you for coming on Cross Politics.
I think we named the title of the class is wrongly named. It should be like some theological rebel yell or something like that.
I don't know. I like battle tactics for the baptized.
Yeah, there we go.
I thought that was pretty rad. So talk a little bit in your course description. I think you're naming some of the idols. I mean, the course description, I sort of went a little bit kind of standard sounding, but I'm hearing you say that basically you're saying modernism and postmodernism and radical trends and critical theory studies. I mean, these are some of the idols you're talking about. Can you describe those idols, how they've infiltrated the area that Christ claims, and how we're going to smash those idols?
Yeah, I need some popcorn. I'm sorry. Go ahead. This is going to be good.
Now, I think one of the ways I approach this is, of course, I sort of do, you could call it theological genealogy, if you will.
Yeah.
I go back, especially in a break between really Christendom and the West's move away from a theologically centered vision.
Yeah.
And there are some innovations that happen long time ago. We'll get into that with the class, that start to introduce ideas that are not consistent with the Christian view of God. And in some of these were actually came out of Islamic thinking and some of the debates that entered into the arena of theology. And it started to put such an emphasis on God as is almost just pure power, but no other attributes, and arbitrary power. And so what I do is I trace the way that starts to develop a new notion of nature as basically arbitrary power, history as basically undirected, an undirected force. The providence gets redefined, and then sort of the human being in particular starts to be it's not conceived holistically as the image of God, both the rational nature and everything else, but basically a sheer will. And a self that basically is Lord over everything.
Wow.
And so basically the attribute of God as pure power, omnipotence, almost becomes the attribute of humanity. And this is so humanity is the one who generates through its own resources and will all of reality. It defines what's good and bad. So I really want to do a lot of tracing of that history that has brought us this distinct understanding of nature, experience, history, and of course the self. And then that God of the self, if you will, and the idol behind it. That idol basically gets thrown out the door a little later, but it gets replaced with a new idol, and that's what all these different theories tend to be: expressions, different idols, if you will, that have grown out of throwing off of some of the old ones. And so critical theory would be one. It's taking another creaturely reality, making it everything, and then making everything else, oppressing everything else, if you will, under what it takes to be the most significant reality. And this is what you always have going on. And this is why those gods are always oppressive.
Dr. Price, I want to ask you kind of a practical question I've been kicking around in my head the last week. Everywhere I look, I look at conservative states, conservative cities, and so forth, and conservatives have done a good job building good economies, good cities, and then the liberals come and take them.
Yes.
I mean, they do. I mean, look at
Texas.
Texas, yeah. Dallas is taken over by liberals. San Antonio, Houston, all the big cities.
Yeah, that's right.
But I cannot. I think there's a couple examples, but I cannot really find where conservatives are doing this with liberal cities.
Yeah.
Why? I'm asking this practical question because I think some of what you're saying is driving at this local reality. Why is it that conservatives lose cities and then they can't take over liberal cities?
I think it's an excellent question for some of the way in which these ideas end up impacting conservatives. I think one is the way in which conservatives have shied away from the reality questions and have wanted to emphasize that everything can be dealt with economically, right? So economic conservatism will bring all the rest if we get that in place. And, Jesus said very wisely once upon a time that you can't live by bread alone, right?
Right.
So what happens with the if you will, liberal and left-leaning cities and groups is they take up a spiritual and moral vision, right? They go after, or even if it is a terrible one, that's what they do. And this is, I like to retrieve classical terms from the Christian tradition, like true theology and true religion. And I think what you have going on here is bad religion and idolatry, but it is filling that arena that a lot of conservatives often overlook. A lot of conservatives, for example, will themselves practice, their faith, be committed to these things, defend, Christian understandings of marriage and life and these things, but they don't go further than that. They sort of see that as a private space, if you will, that they don't think they are allowed to have a say in a strong way. The left don't think like that. They think they have the right to have a say and tell you
That's exactly
what to think. And that's really where it's been a loss of nerve. So hopefully this will help, even this class and these kind of things will help to stop losing nerve.
Hey, Dr.
If Christ... Go ahead.
No, what were you going to say? I'm going to finish that. Finish that, brother. If Christ is what?
Well, if Christ is Lord of all reality, and the cosmos has been impacted by the resurrection and the ascension, and then we have been called to attest to that fullness, then we do have the legitimate authority to tell them what's right and wrong and everything else. But we do it Christianly.
Right.
Yeah.
What he said, I definitely don't want to step on those toes. Don't mess with Jesus, baby. Don't mess with Jesus. When you said they don't step into that area, they'll defend. I've noticed this too. We'll worry about evangelism. We'll get into abortion ministries. We'll get into marriage and defend those things. But there's a certain thing that Christians don't really give their time to. And you said that, but why is it that they don't see that as gospel or Christian circles to get involved with? Why are they limited there? What's stopping them? And then when the world does it, they see their worldview as total. Yeah. Is it an eschatological issue? What is it that's stopping Christians from getting into the whole thing?
Well, I think there are a lot of things that have gone into it, but I think one of the strong impulses, if you will, that kind of shaped that or forces was, I think during I would say, especially after Darwin entered the picture in the universities and basically ran Christians that didn't want to accept that, uncritically out of the academic arena. I think a lot of Christians started to become intellectually fearful. And so they didn't have all that, sexy lingo of the university to present their ideas, and all the universities now were given over to the rest, so they could come in and sound very persuasive and intelligent, where oftentimes Christians sounded very reactionary because they kind of went into their own pockets, but they didn't pursue this battle. Now, there were figures that did, but they were rare. And so I think Christians said, as long as they're not messing with us, and they're not coming into our territory, we're going to kind of try to live a peaceful coexistence. Wow. But I think what we've seen is they're there. The other gods, if you will, the no gods they're not happy with that. They want to come in because in some ways you place as a Christian a limit on their absolute control and autonomy. And so they can't, they're competitive, the false gods. And so they need that territory. But I think what happened is Christians backed out of those areas in some ways from intimidation. In others, they lost familiarity with the arguments and didn't really know how to engage it.
Right now, I've seen a lot of talk about the Enlightenment, and I've been trying to... There's two things, when you start talking about an academic class, one of the first things I think about is, oh my goodness, there's going to be so many people scared to jump inside of an academic class. But right now, the battles that we're fighting, it's amazing to me that it's really been academic. And then when people are trying to figure out, well, how do I use these weapons? Is there going to be, what would you say to somebody who's fearful of being able to take this class and not really getting, because they're not academic. They don't think in those ways. What is somebody going to say? I feel like what's his name? Daniel LaRusso in Karate Kid. When do I learn how to punch? Because all academics sometimes feels like it's just a whole bunch of knowledge with no effectiveness inside of the culture. So what is somebody going to walk away with?
That's right. And great. Yeah. The way I want to approach the class is something really that breaks down that space of intimidation. And what I plan to do is keep it at a place where we're getting the substance without having to get into the technical stuff too deeply, and really deal with things. Come at it from angles. I picked one book. It was a sort of secular Jew wrote it. Peter Gay at Yale University. He wrote a lot of books on history of modernity and the Enlightenment. Well, the book I picked deals with it from the perspective of art and literature, the different areas that brought the modern Enlightenment vision into the living room and the homes of everybody. So everyone's been impacted in the West by the Enlightenment and of course, postmodernity and the like. And it's come through all these vehicles like art, music, culture, technology, and trends. And so I'm approaching it sort of from that angle. These are the ways that this stuff ends up on your lap, and this is typically what it looks like. As a matter of fact, if you hear yourself using this phrase or that, you probably picked it up without knowing it, right? Mm-hmm. That's sort of the approach I'm taking. I'm not looking at it from, okay, back here, Immanuel Kant, dealt with, in his critique of pure reason, synthetic a priori. We're not looking at that kind of stuff.
He's speaking in tongues.
Okay. I just need a translator.
And so I do want to keep it because I'm very mindful that people can feel intimidated with this kind of the intellectual battle. But on the other hand, I think we have to go there. Yeah. I think one key reason is because I think there's a point at which the false gods are just about to destroy completely the academic institutions around us. And if we don't have a substantive alternative built properly around, truth and beauty and goodness, I think we're going to find ourselves in a much worse situation than could be. So this is one of those classes that allows you to survive these dark ages, if you will, by carrying actually some light into the battle and out of it.
Yeah, even atheists right now are seeing the academic world about to fall. And so you're right, we do need to be building an alternative. Could you help me understand the Enlightenment and how it applies to where we're at right now in our culture? That's a big question.
The whole thing.
The whole thing. You got 3 minutes.
Okay. Well, I think one way to, if you could, Peter Gay's actual quote is make it new. You want to talk about the Enlightenment. Classical visions, Christian or philosophical for that matter, tended to look towards the ancient, the source of everything, the first principles.
Right.
Modernity looked towards the new. And there was something it meant by the new. It meant the new that you have the capacity through your own creaturely resources. Dare to use your own reason and your own will, apart from any premise, apart from any God, any commandments,
Romans 1.
any tradition. Immanuel Kant said, dare to use your own reason, right? Dare to use your own thinking, and whether it's up against God, the true God, or anything else, the boldness to use your own and ground everything in your own is sort of what the Enlightenment was up to. And so, although they did retrieve something, I think that Christianity itself had eclipsed that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that we can, when we put our mind to observing nature, for example, do all kinds of amazing things. But these are part of being made in the image of God. It's not part of being a God.
Right.
And I think modernity basically deifies, or attempts to deify the human being and the human's natural capacities, and it makes them the center of everything. And so, from either your own reason or your own reason interpreting your own experience, that becomes the foundational authority for what's true, what isn't true.
Wow.
And there is one thing that's very important to add there, is that the active contribution of the human becomes very significant. Now, this is important when you get to critical theory, because I want you to think about what's going on here. So what one Enlightenment figure said is basically, when you understand anything, you don't really understand that thing as it is in and of itself. You understand it as you've put your interpretation on it. So you never really understand the world. All you understand is your interpretation of it, or it through your interpretation. Well, eventually rip the outer world off altogether, and you get social construct. There is no truth out there. It's all a construct.
That's exactly right.
Rip the reason out and put the will there, and it's all a social construct meant to affirm your will. So when you're preaching the gospel, you're not concerned about the truth of Christ. You're basically positing something that your will benefits for your own survival or privilege.
Wow.
And so the Enlightenment it cultivates the ground, and it allows for these theories to spring up and bounce around unchallenged.
Dr. Tom Price, Theology and Culture. You want to go to flfnetwork.com.
That's
you
right.
want to get in this class.
Class is starting this week.
Can I get a free hookup?
Starting this week. Sign up now. There are still spaces. I want to sign up. Are you going to sign up?
Put my name in, baby. I'm in. Dr. Price, we can spend all day talking to you, brother. So grateful
thanks
for
so
you.
much.
God bless you. Are you signed up? Go do that right now. More Cross Politic coming up with Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. You don't want to miss that from Stanford.
You got that down.
When a medical need arises, hundreds of thousands of Christians across the nation care for one another by sharing financially for those medical needs. Samaritan members pray and reflect God's love and care by providing for one another. While times continue to change, God's love doesn't. He cares for us as we are called to care for one another.
Hey, the doctor's on here. What's up?
Okay. Yeah, I do it. Okay. Here we go. All right, doctor.
Doctor's on.
There we go.
All right, here we go.
Everybody
We can shake hands.
up.
We can shake hands now.
Right.
Here we go.
No, still fist bumping.
Hey, he came back.
I know he did.
Dr. J came back.
Welcome back to Cross Politic.
Don't ruin it, Gabe.
Got to keep it professional.
Okay.
We always have people like Dr. J on this show.
That's funny.
Oh, that's funny.
Hey, with us on the line, as you can see, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. He's professor of medicine at Stanford University. He's a research associate at the National Bureau of Economics Research, senior fellow, the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research, and at the Stanford Freeman Spogli Institute. I probably killed that name again. He holds courtesy appointments as professor in economics and in health research and policy. He directs the Stanford Center on the Demography and Health and Aging.
And he's Cross Politics doctor.
And he's our official epidemiologist for the show. His particular area of research focuses on the economics of healthcare around the world, with a particular emphasis on the health and well-being of vulnerable populations.
Wow.
He's been published everywhere on many things.
Yeah.
He holds an MD and PhD in economics from Stanford University and is one of the authors of the brand new Great Barrington Declaration, which we're going to talk to him about today. Dr. J, thanks for coming back on Cross Politic.
Oh, it's a great pleasure to be here.
So tell us about the Great Barrington Declaration. What were your thinking? What's your goal, and how's it going?
So the goal is to fundamentally transform how we deal with this epidemic. The main idea behind dealing with the epidemic to date has focused on controlling the spread, the community spread of the disease by lockdowns, essentially shutting down business activities, shutting down our ability to go to church, shutting down schools, basically cutting off our ability to function in society in any normal way whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And the idea is we slow the spread of the disease, and then and that will somehow solve the epidemic. That policy has failed. It's failed, and it's actually not that smart of a policy. So the problem is that it turns out for this disease, there's two groups. If you're over 70, this is a very deadly disease. I mean, I think the survival rate is something like 94, 95%. Still, it's a pretty deadly disease. Whereas if you're under 70, the survival rate is something like 9,995 out of 10,000. Right? So for under 70, the lockdowns have hurt people much more than the disease itself.
Wow.
So, 1 in 4 young adults have seriously considered suicide this past June in the United States. Even more shocking to me is that the collapse of the world economies worldwide have led to 130 million people worldwide who are at risk of starvation this year as a consequence of the lockdowns. Mm-hmm. It's an immoral policy, and it has to change. Right? We have to acknowledge that this policy has costs, and not just money. It's health costs. Lives are being lost as a result of them.
And so this Great Barrington Declaration, you and some other doctors got together to kind of put out kind of a new vision of how or probably an old vision actually, of how we should be dealing with the COVID panic.
Yeah, actually, Gabriel, you're right. It's basically an old vision in some sense. It's how we've dealt with many other epidemics in the past successfully, right? So, for instance, so what are the ideas in it? So I co-wrote it with Professor Sunetra Gupta at Oxford University and Professor Martin Kulldorff at Harvard University. Okay. The ideas are very, very simple. We have to protect the vulnerable, the older people, much better than we have been doing. The lockdowns actually, strangely, have not protected the vulnerable. Nursing homes famously have had huge outbreaks. We've not done a good job protecting them. But even worse, we deem certain people essential workers, even if they're vulnerable. A 63-year-old bus driver who faces actually pretty high risk if they should get infected, we ask them to go and get exposed to the virus, or face a loss of a job. We should be using our money, our resources, our ingenuity to protect the vulnerable, no matter where they are. Whether they're living in multi-generational homes, our workers, older workers, and nursing homes, that's where we should be using our ingenuity to protect. Use our resources, testing, whatever it takes. We can use, for instance, disability accommodation laws, so employers can provide accommodations for older workers who would face some risk. We do this for other conditions where people are vulnerable. We can do this for this condition. There's all kinds of ideas we could use. The lockdowns themselves have led to a lot of younger people going back to live with their families, older people. It's actually increased the amount of exposure the older people have had to younger people as a result of the lockdowns. It's kind of this very strange policy. So for them, protect them. That's part one.
Go ahead. You got part two coming?
I'm taking notes, Doc. Go ahead. Go to 10
I want to hear part two.
To.
I had a question, but I heard part one. I want to hear part two now.
Part two is very simple. Let everyone else live their life. Let us go back to church. Let us open our businesses. Let us. Now, I say, like, a lot of people may still think that there's a risk. No one's forcing them to participate. Right. But the psychological harm from these lockdowns for a set of people who don't actually face a huge risk from the disease has been enormous. Not just psychological, but medical. People have skipped cancer treatments. People have skipped diabetes management care. People there've been mass immunization campaigns that have stopped around the world. I already mentioned the starvation. In the United States. People are more. Some people with cancer are more afraid of COVID than cancer, which is really just medically not right. I mean, I think so for them, for everyone else for whom COVID risk is less of a threat than the lockdowns, set us free. That's part two.
Doc, it's funny because I'm listening to you talk about these numbers, and I've heard these numbers. These are numbers that people were projecting kind of could happen at the beginning of this early part of the year, and it came true. It happened, which is a horrible thing. But it seems like that a lot of people don't really care about those numbers. And I'm wondering, are you guys getting any traction with the declaration? Are you having a voice? Because no matter how much I will communicate to people, the other numbers, the fallout from the pandemic shutdowns and the mandates, no one seems to care much about those numbers. Are you noticing the same thing? And what has been your response to that?
I mean, I think there's been a bifurcated response. I've seen on the one side an enormous outpouring support for these ideas. People are tired of the lockdown. Even within the scientific community, tens of thousands of doctors, epidemiologists, scientists have signed on to the Great Barrington Declaration because these ideas are just a call to return to standard public health practice. Mm-hmm. It's not anything new in some sense. It's not novel.
It's mad.
So on the other hand, the people who argue for lockdowns, they really do have a blind spot to these costs, and it's absolutely shocked me. There's 130 million starving people around the world. I mean, that additional people starving, that should shock the conscience of every single person on the face of the earth.
Damn.
And if you're thinking about lockdowns, you have to cope with that reality that these lockdowns come at enormous human cost. These lives are just as important as an American, even if many of them are not in the United States, they're just as important human life as here. And so why do we adopt a policy that would contribute to that? It's just, as I said, I think it's immoral.
You just don't know how to love your neighbor, though, Dr. J.
I'm trying. You know what? That's a problem for all of us, and I'm working on it.
So I'm looking at the signature page on the Great Barrington Declaration, which is gbdeclaration.org. So you can go there. You can
sign it.
See the statement. Read the statement. If you agree with it,
I'm doing it right now.
It says there are 567,793 concerned citizens have signed it as of now. That's just normal people like Gabe.
Yep.
And then 11,000 over 11,000 medical and public health scientists, over 30,000 medical practitioners. So go to gbdeclaration.org, add your signature. What's been the fallout from this statement? Maybe particularly in the medical field, the medical industry. Is this making ripples? Is it having the kind of effect that you hoped it would?
Well, I think one thing it's done is it's made very clear. Like a lot of times you hear from the other side in favor of lockdowns. Well, we just have to follow the science.
Right.
Well, the thing is, the science was not actually unified.
Right.
On this, and that has become utterly clear. There's a competing declaration, a memorandum they're called, the John Snow Memorandum, arguing for lockdowns that pro-lockdown people have issued in response to this.
Okay.
Now, I view that as a great victory. In a sense, we now know that there's two competing visions within science. It's not one science thinking one way. The science actually is divided.
Right.
Actually, you can go compare the arguments yourself. I think the arguments in the competing side are actually quite weak. But but at least now no one can say that there's a single scientific vision. Science is divided, right? So I think that's a great victory, and it's forced people in favor of lockdowns to try to make arguments in favor of them. I can run through some of those arguments in favor and why I don't think much of them, but I think that's really good. We now are actually engaged in a debate as opposed to just a groupthink exercise where we say, oh, let's just do what the scientists say.
Right.
Have you had any conversations with politicians or people in positions of authority who are making these kind of calls where you feel like you've really made progress?
I mean, I think the politicians I've talked to have been mostly against the lockdowns. I mean, the pro-lockdown politicians have not reached out to me as yet. Okay. Although I would be very happy to talk with them. I mean, I think with the American public, I think we made a lot of progress. I mean, I think I saw a poll that said 57% now oppose lockdowns nationwide. Okay. That's huge progress. Mm-hmm. I think, and you see in the pages of things like the New York Times saying that there's lockdown fatigue. People are tired of lockdowns.
Right.
Yeah.
A public health strategy that relies on people to lock down for 1, 2, 3 years, that's a strategy is bound to fail. Humans are not meant to live like this. We are meant to live in community, to interact with one another. We have the public health strategies that we adopt have to take into account human nature, not pretend like human nature can be molded to a way they can't actually be.
But in order to think like that, you have to think that there's a creator.
Right.
And
he made man.
And we're made in his image, and that we're holistic beings, and it's not just something that we mold into our own image.
Hey, Dr. J, let's say that me and a couple other businessmen have companies right now that are kind of underneath, I don't know, New York's mandate. Yeah. And would you recommend that we take something like this and say, you know what, guys, let's come together and just open up our businesses. Let's just do that, because we can't continue to live like this. And starting to see it kind of happen in small sects. My problem is that as long as it's small sects, there's no power to actually push back against the government. So what does someone do with this declaration who has a company that shut down after they signed this, of course?
I mean, what you're talking about is basically civil disobedience, right? I mean, I think there may be.
I didn't say that. I didn't. I mean, you said that.
Let's say that. Let's think about that.
I'm with that.
We're Presbyterian.
There may be a time when that's necessary. I don't know. I still think at this point the democratic governance still would work, right? So reason with the people that rule over us. Tell them here's what the science really is saying. Here's what here's what's at stake. These lockdowns are not actually controlling the spread. You can see it hasn't controlled the spread. There's still, some places in New York City that are growing. And the only question is protecting the vulnerable. Are we doing a good job at that? I mean, I think if you make those arguments, those are reasonable arguments. And reasonable people will respond to those reasonable arguments. I still think that the democratic process can work in this. It's as frustrating as it has been.
Even in California?
You're assuming there's reasonable people, though, Doc. There's a couple assumptions there I'm concerned about.
I just saw I saw the regulations Newsom put out for
Thanksgiving,
for Christmas,
or what's been called,
and I'm like, what?
Well, I mean, there, like I said, there may be a time where civil disobedience is worthwhile, but I think not just yet. I also think we can use the legal processes. We've had legal victories, actually. So in Florida, for instance, we've managed to keep the schools open, thanks to some legal victories. In Michigan, the Supreme Court ruled against the emergency orders because they were unconstitutional.
Right.
I think people are starting to understand that these lockdowns violate our civil liberties in fundamental ways.
Yeah.
And
I don't know about that. I was arrested about a month ago for singing psalms in our front of City Hall.
While singing psalms, yeah.
While singing psalms, not wearing a mask. And President Trump retweeted my arrest, and it kind of made our city look pretty silly. But we were practicing our First Amendment rights, and they arrested us.
I saw that, and I was absolutely shocked.
It was unbelievable.
Right? I think it's utterly clear that our civil liberties have been violated. And I think the American Republic is a strong. I'm really glad I live in a place that has these kind of protections, legal protections. Let's take advantage of them. Let's work to do lawsuits against officials that go too far. Let's work on democratic processes to register complaints. Protests apparently are fine with public health officials. So let's protest.
Right.
And Doc, I guess my question is, looking at how long we've already been out of business and looking at trying to fight that at the same time, our resources are dwindling in such a way that to be able to fight and having the money to do so without being able to do business.
Yeah,
we're it's by the time we get done trying, are we going to be even able to fight financially?
I don't know. I think it's not the financial resources. I think it's moral courage. It's power from above that sustains us.
Well, then preacher.
So speaking of, there being different views, a diversity of views, one of the things, I don't know if we talked with you about this last time, but one of the other practical things has been the whole masking thing.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that, and my concern all along has been there is a diversity of views on the effectiveness of masking. What kind of mask? Is it cloth mask? Any kind of covering? What's your take on the mask mandates, particularly given the diversity in the scientific literature on that?
So first, let me just note, any public health sort of diktat, any public health sort of policy that we adopt should seek to unite, not divide.
Right.
And what has happened with the mask is an evidence of a failed public health policy. What it's done in the public is it's created this set, like on one group, that if you wear a mask, therefore you care for other people, and therefore I'm a good person if I'm wearing a mask. Right. There's one on one side. On the other side, it's if I don't wear a mask, I'm standing up for my individual liberties, and it's created this like animosity inside the public that is just exactly the opposite of what the goal of any good public health policy should be, which is seek to unite us. The common enemy here is the virus, not each other, and yet the public health policy has created this divide. So I think that. Now, why has that happened? Partly because the evidence on masks actually is very mixed. In some settings it's great, like in hospital settings. If you're in crowded areas, masks can reduce the spread, especially if there may be people symptomatic in the crowd. On the other hand, people wearing masks outside, there's not a ton of evidence that does much good. I think it's just mixed, and the only randomized evidence comes from like data on mask mandates comes from like influenza, where you haven't found a real positive effect on slowing the spread.
Right.
And if you look at how well it's done to slow the spread of COVID, places have adopted masks when cases are increasing. The cases keep increasing. They've adopted masks when cases are decreasing, and then sometimes it comes back despite the adoption of the mask mandate. I'd say at best it's mixed. I think good public health messaging could work here. Here are the situations when masks work. You should be really careful about using them here. These are the kinds of masks that work. I think if we were very careful to say that and not create divisions unnecessarily, that would be a much more effective way to do it. Right now, it's I think a mask mandate would utterly divide the country.
Yeah.
It seems like this goes back to the history or the old way of handling pandemics. It seems like, I think you guys made this point in an interview I was watching a couple weeks ago with you, where in this pandemic, all we're doing is focusing just on how we can stop the virus. We aren't focusing, it's like when you put out a forest fire, you're making a number of calculations. Of course, you're trying to put out the fire, but you're calculating where's the wind blowing, where's the hill, where's the houses, where's all these things. But for just this pandemic, all we're doing is focusing on the virus, and that's been the strategy. It hasn't been kind of a holistic view like what the Barrington, Barrington
it's the
Declaration.
Great Barrington Declaration.
Get the great, Gabe.
Get the great. So address that. I mean, why are we just focusing on that one thing?
I think that's the biggest mistake we made in this epidemic in some sense, right? So public health is a multifaceted thing. It's not simply virus control. It's not simply infection control. That where humans are made wonderfully in a very complicated way in his image, and that is a complicated image. There's other things to life than just. In fact, we're not bags of germs looking to avoid infecting one another. Public health should acknowledge that. We should acknowledge the fact that there's we get cancer, we get diabetes, we get depressed, we get all those things. We need to be able to make a living so that our families can be fed. We have all these needs. I mean, those are just base needs, but in some sense, really important ones that need to be taken into account in public health. And public health practice should never lose sight of that, and it absolutely has. It's decided that the only relevant thing is COVID control, and with the results that you see. I think, I don't know how to describe it beyond this. It's just a mistake. Like, we have to return to a public health practice that views people as more than just vectors of infections.
Doesn't one of this thing shows us that we've been giving the government too much authority over our health for too long? I mean, one of the reasons why we're in this mess is we just kept handing more authority over to the government, more health authority over, and now the government can tell us to put a mask on our face?
Well, and let me just, I want to kind of piggyback on that and frame that a little different, Dr. J. Part of this, and I appreciate doctors like you, who you've been a godsend and a blessing to be able to find in the midst of trying to weed through this back in March. This was crazy. And so being able to find you has been a blessing. But one of the things that, like with Gabe, my question has been, whose responsibility is it to make sure that my grandmother, my mom, the people in my family are taken care of and protected? That's my responsibility. And so I would love the information, but you don't get to decide for me where and who I get to put my mom with. Right? And so my problem has been the overreach of kind of the health industry and the healthcare.
But it's driven by the state, though, because there's a gun behind it.
That's right.
There's threats behind it.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'm of two minds. I do think that the government has some responsibility. I think public health has to be public.
Sure.
And there's a responsible role for the government and the public health authorities in how they convey information, how they make decisions that affect jointly all of us. I mean, I think there is definitely a real role for that. So I don't think, I'm not of the side of saying let's get rid of it. I think the problem is that they've overstepped.
Right. That's right.
There
That's
are
right.
limits to what they should be able to do to a free people.
That's right.
And they've overstepped that. And now I can even imagine a disease where some of those actions might be justified. Like, so imagine a disease that killed kids differentially. I would be much more open to a lot of the actions that have been taken. But that's not what this is. This disease seems to harm kids very little. So I think the data are not sufficient for me, at least for me, to say, oh yeah, well, we need to take these drastic actions that have curtailed our civil liberties, that have made it so that I'm supposed to think about whether I want have Thanksgiving. The government's telling you not to have Thanksgiving. I mean, I think that's an overstep. I think it's an overreach. Those are, tell us what the risks are.
Yes.
And then we'll make our choice on that.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Great Barrington Declaration.
What's the website?
gbdeclaration.org. Read it, share it, sign it, send it to your civil magistrates.
Yeah. Hey, Dr. J, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for what you're doing, and we're praying for you.
Yep.
And I hope this gets real traction, and I hope that you guys make an impact and we can turn this thing around. Appreciate you, brother. If you're single, get married. If you're married, have kids. If you have kids, go baptize them. Until next week, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is Cross Politic.
We did not design a cookie-cutter curriculum meant to chop students into appropriately shaped submissives or snowflakes for the secular zeitgeist. We designed our curriculum the way we did because we want our graduates to be equipped to stand courageously against that destructive zeitgeist and to honor their maker and how they, body, mind, and soul, battle to save their communities and the entire Western world from our current diseased insanity. New St. Andrews College is not in the business of rubber stamping graduates for this particular job market or that particular career. We aren't happy unless our graduates are equipped to tackle any constructive cultural task anywhere, from courtrooms to hospitals to job sites to movie sets to the highest risk job and the most important setting of all, the raising and training of the next generation of immortal souls around dining room tables and in pews. The world may have gone mad, but it's not the first time. It has been saved before and by particular people, many of whom shared a very particular type of education. Augustine, Calvin, Jefferson, Churchill, and many lesser-known heroes in times of madness all had one type of education, one type of training in common. And it's the same kind of rigorous education we currently pursue surrounded by the rolling wheat fields of Idaho. By God's grace, our civilization will be saved, or rebuilt, from the smoking ruins. The men and women capable of such a task, capable of fearless joy and fiery laughter, all while undertaking such hard cultural labor, those are the kind of graduates we want, the kind we expect. They are why we exist, and why we teach what we teach. So you might call it a major in world building, or culture shaping, or a major in saving civilization. We call it classical Christian liberal arts. New St. Andrews College, saving civilization since 1994.